Where do you see this storyline in a month or so, character development-wise? For obvious reasons, I will be limited in my ability to comment on this. However, I hope that by next month, readers will have a better understanding of what I am attempting to achieve and will not just consider surface-level trauma but also the psychological turmoil that affects everyone. When evaluated with a more critical eye, only then can character growth become apparent. Many disagree with my assertion that L&B is a complex story, which is perfectly acceptable. However, by complex, I mean that I don't see any of my characters as good or terrible individuals. Although I don't agree with the majority of their choices or acts, I understand why these decisions and actions occurred in the first place. My moral compass is very straightforward, but when I consider this story, it becomes warped. All of the characters are either in the process of developing or have already changed. Every character views their activities as good. It all depends on how you see the distinction between good and evil. This is what I mean when I describe L&B as a multifaceted story. Everyone in this story justifies their poor behavior with what they think to be a good explanation, despite the fact that, from your perspective as the reader, it's quite horrible. Furthermore, I do not consider the antagonists in any of my works to be bad characters. They are only characters pursuing their own objectives in accordance with their own moral perspective of the world and what they deem to be right. Just as the protagonist strives to attain their own objective, which they regard to be good. Both of these motivations might be seen as either good or evil, depending on the reader. I hope that during the following month, my writing and characters will be able to convey my ideas more clearly. Where do you get your information about dissociative identity disorder for your portrayal of Shoto? Do you use a mix of sources? At university, I read numerous books and completed a minor in psychology. I do my best to present it from my own perspective while adhering to the mental illness's actual facts. However, I wish that readers will also not use how I write it for self-diagnosis, as I may not always be accurate and that should be done by a professional. DID is one of the mental illnesses that has always intrigued me more than I would have liked, and I knew I would want to create a story in which this disorder plays a crucial role. Shoto is a very important character to me, and I frequently use him as a self-insert. I have dissociated frequently throughout my life, ever since I was a youngster, but I've never precisely understood why, nor did I wish to do so. But as a child, my mind was always cloudy, which made it hard for me to connect with other people. I constantly felt as though I was seeing my life unfold from the inside out. DID is a very complex mental disorder for which there are still so many unanswered questions and so few answers in general. I'm aware that I won't be able to show it exactly as it should be, but I want to do it in my own manner. So I read a lot and did a lot of research on this topic in order to convey my own perspective of DID and how it impacts my characters. Are Shoto's feminine attributes the result of his trauma, or has he always enjoyed dressing up in feminine clothing? Shoto inherited his mother's love of femininity. Shoto and his mother were extremely close and were often around each other. As Shoto grew up, he linked all the manly attributes he saw to violence and everything he despised, since his idea of masculinity is severely skewed due to his father and their violent relationship. Shoto wants to be soft and cared for, yet he associates such sentiments and acts with being feminine, which his father despises. So, certainly, you could argue that all of his habits are tied to his trauma in some way. However, as he grew older, he realized that he just enjoys beautiful and adorable things, the majority of which are branded as feminine and for women. How has the comic changed since you first started it and came up with ideas? To be fair, a lot has changed. In both good and negative aspects, I have many more character storylines, personalities, and backstories to concentrate on than in previous phases of creation. It may become a little overwhelming at times, and I have to think about how each character would behave in certain scenarios based on their characteristics. Sun and I have a lot more work than before, a lot of promotion, and a lot of sleepless nights, but at the end of the day, we appreciate everyone's support. Are you guys thinking of creating other merch for this comic? We really hope we can create a good amount of merch for L&B in the future. However, our time nowadays is very limited to the stuff we can do within our schedule. What was the hardest scene you've created so far? Also, do you have a favorite scene/episode out of the ones you've created? This is a pretty hard question to answer, but I'll try my best. Writing this type of story has made me very desensitized to certain things, especially violence. However, I always get emotional when I have to write scenes that involve any form of abuse, whether sexually, physically, or emotionally. It just really hits home for me, and I tend to put my all into it. When I write these scenes, the dialogue comes from within me, and it's truly how I feel and how I think the characters would react. Chapter 07 was probably one of those hard scenes I had to write, and I actually censored it in the comic compared to the script. It was a bit more realistic and graphic in the first draft of the script I did. However, I knew that would be a bit much, and I could get the same results by minimizing the realism. As a writer, I have grown and learned to censor some of my thoughts and understand that our readers are also human beings with their own traumas. I know that most of our readers ignore the trigger warnings I post for them, so I try to be more self-aware in my writing. My favorite scenes are usually the fluff that comes after the mentally draining chapters. It gives me a sense of, yes, this is the sun after the gloomy storm, and I feel very at ease. I believe our readers also feel that way, so it makes me happy to write those scenes. Will we get a chapter soon about the Nakamura family and their history? By the time this video is uploaded, the Nakamura family should be the main focus. I hope it is going well. If not, my apologies. How much thought have you put into the astrological signs of the characters? Not that much, only with the main characters. I believe that astrology signs don't really make a person or character feel truly real, but their experiences do, and that also shapes them as a person. Are all the Tanaka siblings close to each other, or only selected ones? I'm not sure if close is the right word to use in their situation. They do love and care about each other as any siblings would. However, they consider the Syndicate to be family in general, so if you go against the Syndicate, you are going against your family. So, it doesn't matter about closeness, it's just about who is there for the Syndicate. In previous episodes, Garo mentioned that he wanted Shoto when they met in middle school, but Shoto knew him and interacted with him even before then, grade school. How come Garo doesn't remember Shoto from then? Or is Garo implying that he became more interested in Shoto in middle school? It's not that he doesn't remember him. He and Shoto were both rather young when they met. Shoto fell in love with him the first time he saw him, but as a child, he didn't fully understand what he was experiencing. All he knew was that this boy made me happy and excited. Garo felt the same way when he saw Shoto. He thought, oh, I've never met somebody like this before. Garo had grown up among people who were incredibly wealthy and privileged. Thus, Shoto was a breath of fresh air for him, but at 9 years old, he didn't understand why. When they ended up in the same middle school, they were a little older and knew more about the world around them, which pushed them closer together. And Garo just wanted to protect him since this was also about the time he began to build his ideals for the people he killed. Has Garo ever been jealous of people pursuing Shoto, not just from the scene we saw with Takahide? Of course, he is a very possessive character, and he's also very spoiled and privileged himself. He believes Shoto is his, and he doesn't want anyone near him. Why doesn't Shoto have tattoos on his body, even before getting together with Goro, when he was still staying at his family's place? Is it because he wasn't involved yet in the family business? Shoto left the Syndicate and his family before he got his Irizumi. This will be explored more in the comic, as well as the reasons. Who is more possessive, Shoto or Goro? Both of them are equally possessive. However, Shoto is a bit more explosive, which can come off as bratty and aggressive. Whereas Goro's jealousy is a very quiet rage, but it can also get pretty violent. Other than Shoto, are there any other siblings who don't like their father or are on Shoto's side? There are siblings who disagree with the way their father does things, but they realize that he will always be their father. Satsujin is the closest sibling to hate Hiro, mostly because he blames him for the death of Yaku, his best friend, and Shoto's first boyfriend. Satsujin despises Hiro for continuing to justify Yaku's death for the Syndicate and for not listening to Shoto. He also believes his father is a hypocrite, and deep down, Satsujin blames Hiro for Sakura's death. Apart from Satsujin, Karasu does not agree with how Hiro does some things, and he is aware that there is a mental health problem in the family that everyone overlooks, but he is aware that Hiro is suffering psychologically and refuses to speak about it, which affects everyone. Will we see more of Hiro's childhood and story? He is my favorite character storyline-wise because he's so interesting and mysterious. Yes, Hiro is a key character in LNB, so his story is very important. I won't release any more details about it, though, because he has a lot of background to cover. How soon will we see Spring Days, your light novel, incorporated into this series? For example, Yaku and Shoto's relationship. Soon, possibly in the following season. Yaku and Shoto's relationship is really quite essential, and it's one of the saddest backstories I've written for LNB. And I've written a lot of them. I just feel that Yaku was the pinnacle of Shoto's mental health crisis, which is critical. Yaku's death traumatized Shoto to the point that he could no longer devise strategies. Shoto wasn't the only one devastated by Yaku's death. Turtle was also deeply affected, prompting him to become even more unstable and violent. The majority of Turtle's rage is directed specifically toward Hiro. Can you explain why the younger children were housed separately despite Hiro's strong sense of familial ties? Who lived in the main house? The children were separated for a variety of reasons. When Hiro married Sakura and became the Syndicate's boss, he purchased a large estate. He was aware that Sakura desired a large family, but he imagined it would be limited to 3 children. However, they ended up producing 10 children together, 3 of whom died but are still listed in the family registration. As a result, Hiro was required to buy another estate nearby, which had much more area for training and also to sustain all of the eccentric personalities the children had. For example, Hebe is obsessed with snakes and has been since he was a child, so he kept snakes as pets that he raised. They also required other helpers to assist Sakura. She couldn't do it all by herself, so they had to be separated. Regardless, they continued to have family gatherings and were quite close. The siblings could also choose where they wanted to sleep. The main house, on the other hand, seemed a little cozier since Sakura and Hiro were there. If Hiro slept at the main house, his personal bodyguards would be ordered to watch the second house, but most times he wouldn't feel comfortable leaving Sakura and the children in the main house alone, even if it was being guarded, so he stayed in the main house mostly. There are numerous reasons, and these are just a few. I hope this helps. I noticed that whenever the topic of rape is mentioned in the story, it's substituted for discipline instead. Was this intentional? Is discipline synonymous with rape? On the topic of rape, did Hiro-san rape Shoto more than once? Interesting question. The word discipline is only substituted when it is spoken by Hiro, but this does not imply that the R word is always implied whenever discipline is used. It all depends on the character's perspective and mindset. In the case of Hiro, everything derives from how he was raised as a child and how his life has transpired. with the harsher being one of the principal punishments he experienced from his own father and others. When the term discipline is used in general, it typically refers to taking authority away from someone or having control over someone, which is what occurs when our word is used. In both instances, your authority is stripped from you, you are unable to protect yourself, and you have no control over the situation. As a result, if this is something that is frequently done to you as a child in the form of discipline, or if this is your punishment, your brain eventually associates the term discipline or punishment with the harsh R, and it can be very triggering. It is extremely similar to how Hiro's brain functions. Nevertheless, yes, everything the characters say is intentional. This is all I can say due to spoilers. I hope this helps. What different phases were you going through when you wrote this book? It seems that we are delving a little more into my personal life, but it's fine. I went through several phases while writing this story. The major ones were depression and loneliness. Even though I still feel this way, I have learned to love and value myself in such a manner that I do not let my trauma overrun my life. To me, LMB is like a biography of my life wrapped in various characters, so I can relate to all of their troubles since I have also experienced them throughout my life. I believe we are all broken in some way, and it's nice to have people in your life who love you despite your scars or traumas, but in reality, not everyone gets that happy ending or gets to have that person in their life, and I believe I am one of those people, so I write about how it made me feel to live a life I wasn't prepared to live. When I began this series, I was really depressed and had a lot of suicidal thoughts. There was a time when I attempted suicide while writing LMB, and Sun was there to help me cope. That was my last attempt in almost 2 years, so I am happy that I was unsuccessful. LMB has taught me how to live with my trauma in my life, and in some ways, I believe it has saved my life. I struggle a great deal with my sexuality, and I know I'll never be able to come out to my family. I've also always felt there was something wrong with me, so portraying characters who can express themselves has always been a goal of mine. I don't have a large support system in my life, so when I read comments, I feel very happy and want to be strong for you guys by writing a story that our readers want to read. Is this book based on a true story? It is based on both fiction and reality, with the characters and their backstories. There is also some self-insert in this story. Growing up, I was the black sheep of my family. I was in gangs, very delinquent, and extremely violent, but it was mostly due to the abuse I was receiving at home, and I really disliked my parents at the time, so I would do a lot of cruel, dangerous things to get attention, thinking that if something bad happened to me, they would care or be sad about it. But in reality, I was just hurting myself, and it wasn't worth it. Some of the incidents and deaths are also based on true stories and testimonies from those close to me, as well as some younger family members. I have friends who were heavily involved in gangs and eventually died as a result of it. I have friends that grew up amid drug use and abuse, among other things I won't get into. That's why I don't like to censor my work. I don't see the sense in sharing a story like this and not being honest about it. You already have to censor yourself a lot as someone with a lot of trauma to avoid offending or making others feel bad or pity you. I don't understand the purpose of writing if I can't write freely. Will we get a side story from the other characters and understand more and how they got to the position that they are in now? There are some characters that I want to touch on, but I won't be able to. I can only touch on the characters that contribute to the plot and the main characters. What inspired you to create this story and also create these specific characters with these traits? I needed representation, so I made it. I wanted individuals with whom I could empathize, personalities that revealed how their suffering impacted them and how it affected others around them. I'm not claiming these characters don't exist. I simply wanted to make some from my own point of view. When it comes to diversity, I wanted to have a more diversified cast in my work since there are so many various sorts of individuals in the world, each with their own style, personality, ethnicity, and so on. For whatever reason, these individuals are underrepresented, which is absurd since you can make very fantastic stories while still having representation. In the future, I'd want to see characters with mental disorders really display signs of them and how they manage or deal with them. since this would raise a lot more awareness among readers than simply sweeping it under the rug. Why, even in cases of sexual assault, is the aftermath never shown? Most characters simply go about their regular lives after that, which isn't often the case with those who have been sexually abused. I despise the fact that rape is so prevalent in forms of literature, but in most cases, not all, it is utilized for shock value and not to raise awareness, and it is just disregarded. The psychological effects of being abused are quite astronomical, and unless someone has Stockholm Syndrome, they rarely ever forgive or reconcile with their abuser or rapist. The truth is that men get raped as well, and I absolutely dislike the fact that when it occurs in most stories, it is often not addressed and is just utilized as shock value, with no portrayal of how this experience impacted your male character. There are males who have been sexually abused, and it has had a significant impact on their lives. I simply don't believe sexual assault with no consequences amongst men should be as popular in stories. I don't think it's particularly realistic, but that's just my personal preference when I consume any media. Although not all stories must be realistic, I wanted to create one that was. It's a bit of a random question, but why does Shoto specifically rub people's ears when he wants to calm down? Side note, I also want to say thank you for creating this story. Like, it's in my top 5 of best BL stories for me, and I just love how you have created these characters with gripping and perplexing stories that make us as read really invested and wanting to find out what happens next and why a character is like that. Thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate them. Shoto mostly rubs the ears of people he feels safe with, and it's used as a form of comfort for him. Show, the little altar, does the majority of the ear rubbing. What is Goro's favorite thing for Shoto to wear? And what is Shoto's favorite thing for Goro to wear? Goro's favorite thing for Shoto to wear is literally nothing. Goro really enjoys seeing Shoto naked or in clothing that shows off Shoto's curves, and Shoto's body is very soft and squishy, and he really likes it. As for Shoto's favorite thing for Goro to wear, he likes seeing Goro in suits, turtlenecks, sweatpants, and muscle shirts. He really likes Goro's muscles and strong build. What's the silliest thing Shoto has ever made Goro do? Well, they actually have play dates and tea parties. Which would be the silliest things Goro does with Shoto? Will the physical book be available in English next summer as well? The official physical copies of LNB will also be in English next year. I wonder if writing this makes you relive any personal trauma, and if so, does it tamper with your excitement for continuing, and how do you push through? Really wonder this often and hope you are always okay, Kurutta. Thank you for asking, and please do not be concerned. Some things do trigger me when I'm writing, so I generally take a break and distract myself with something else. I've decided to keep writing this story because I truly want to see it through, so I'm trying my best. Will there be an audio version, or is one being thought about? There can only be an audio version if the physical copies sell well. So, please buy it when it is released by Tokyo Pop next year. That would be fantastic. Is Shoto the only one that called his dad daddy? And is Hiro bothered by that? Shoto refers to Hiro as daddy rather than father to prevent the little Show from asking questions and to protect his inner child. However, Turtle, the other alter, does not refer to Hiro as daddy, but rather as father, as do his other siblings. On rare occasions, Shoto's other siblings refer to Hiro as daddy, but only when they are in a vulnerable position and desperately need him to be their dad and not a Yakuza boss. Shoto's sister, Eiko, refers to him as daddy when she wants something, but most of the time she calls him father. Hiro isn't bothered by Shoto or any of his other children calling him daddy, but the term brings out a gentler side of him and makes him much more protective. Is Goro ever jealous of Hideki? Sometimes, mostly when they were kids, because Hideki was allowed to be closer to Shoto and not stay in the wealthy circle that Goro had no choice but to stay in. How does Shoto manage to go to university and be a team manager with his social anxiety? When Goro brought him to the gallery, he seemed very anxious about being out in public and being seen by others, even with Goro right next to him. But he looks to be doing fine at school and is comfortable around the team members, even though it's a daily and heavy exposition to the public. Is he only scared of new places? How does he get to school and work on group projects? As most individuals with social anxiety do, he manages. Yes, he is anxious about some activities, but he understands he must still do them. He was worried when Goro brought him to the art gallery due to Goro's popularity, and their involvement would have caused problems for Goro with the media. Nonetheless, when Shoto is fronting, which is the little, his anxiety worsens. Shoto is competent and may even come off as rude at times. At school, he knows he has a safe haven in Goro, and while the first year of university was frightening, after 4 years he has adjusted to it. He does, however, feel anxious most of the time in new situations and with new people, but he is able to conceal it. I hope this helps. Do you have any other work besides LMB? Yes, I have a lot of other work. How did you make this masterpiece? It is very amazing. I have seen so many comments like this, and it actually makes me speechless that you guys consider this to be a masterpiece in your eyes. Thank you very much for your kind words. I don't really know how to answer this question, as I sometimes question my writing as well. But I just write how I feel. Have you planned on writing a new BL or manga after LMB is finished? Yes, I plan to write more queer stories than just BL. I have a lot of ideas for other works. I would really love to write a GL as well. Let's see what the future holds. What is something you'd never do as a writer? By the way, I really love LMB. This is an intriguing question, but I believe the most important thing I would never do as a writer is create a rape scene between two people in a relationship or a non-consensual sex scene that isn't instantly labeled as rape by me. I don't like writing rape scenes in general, and it typically takes me a few days to get into the specifics. So if I had to write a rape scene between a couple, they wouldn't be a couple after, and I would make it clear to readers right away that this is rape and it shouldn't happen. As I said in a couple of the questions above, I feel that rape with no repercussions or response is too normalized in specific stories. I personally dislike writing rape scenes in general, and I normally avoid showing specifics if they aren't crucial to the story. But when there are rape scenes and sexual assault scenes, I genuinely want everyone to understand that what happened was rape, and it's not right. Also, not all readers can distinguish between fiction and reality, and although I recognize that this is not entirely the writer's responsibility, I feel that as authors, we should make it obvious that what occurred was rape or sexual assault, and it should not be normalized or romanticized. If the couple is in a BDSM arrangement that includes non-con, I believe that should also be mentioned whenever you have the time. As a queer person who has experienced sexual assault, I've seen that in most popular stories, the assault is never actually addressed, which may be harmful. As a writer, I have my own preferences, and I like sex with passion. Consensual passion is the finest intercourse scene to write since you can see how the characters connect to one another and fully understand their partner's needs and desires. Furthermore, even outside of a BDSM contract, every intimate relationship, in general, should entail aftercare, even if it is mild. This is my own taste as a writer, so don't take anything I say seriously, and my thoughts are my own. I would also never rush through my stories. I like telling my stories at the pace that I wish to and that the readers can completely comprehend. Thank you for all your questions. These are all my own opinions, so please be mindful of that.